Well, that was pretty awesome. The second race in Detroit delivered on the promise of the first race in Detroit without as much of the controversy, though there were some controversial moments, but ultimately it was a wheel-banging, exciting finish, and I can't wait to talk about it. Let's get into it. And welcome back. We certainly had a lot to talk about yesterday, and unfortunately we have some negative things to talk about today. But first I want to start with positive. I want to be positive at the beginning of this video because there was a lot to be positive about. Number one, I said this yesterday, but I think Firestone absolutely nailed the tire compounds for Detroit. In fact, the entire Detroit Grand Prix event is really beginning to grow on me. It's one of the few events, if not the only event, that I really think benefits from being a doubleheader, because the challenge that the drivers, cars, and teams, and everybody involved is faced with is extremely daunting, and it's truly a spectacle. And the fact that the surface is so rough, and again, Firestone brought a great set of compounds that were very different, had very different characteristics, came on at different points during the race, and that ultimately led to our really exciting finish that we had today. So full credit to them. Again, I think the event itself is really a highlight now on the IndyCar calendar. Do I think it deserves to be the first race after the Indy 500? Especially now that you've got that week gap where you could certainly, if you really wanted to, if you really wanted to, you could fit Milwaukee or something in there. I'm just saying. But on the whole, I mean, this was a really entertaining race, despite the fact that, for the first 50, 60 laps, Joseph Newgarden was the runaway leader of it, and it didn't feel that way. And when a race is dominated by a driver, but you don't ever feel like it's a true domination fest or not very exciting, particularly because the racing through the rest of the field was so good, that was certainly nice to see. I also want to give a shout out to Romain Grosjean because I thought that his firefighting was awesome. Again, he's really kind of leaned into the whole, fire or Phoenix from the fire persona, and him jumping out of his car with his brakes on fire, screaming for a fire extinguisher, only to be told, as Darian Black Flags Matter said, to chill out by the AMR safety team. That was fantastic, and we can laugh about it too because Romain has really kind of leaned into it as well. He had this Instagram post where he's been given a Detroit firefighter shirt with, Grosjean has been so surprisingly great throughout his short IndyCar career. He's been so great with the fans, been very media savvy. He's got a YouTube channel which is doing stonks views right now, so he's great for IndyCar, and I can't wait to see him at Gateway. I think he recently announced that he's going to go run that race and hopefully the whole season next year, because I think Grosjean at the Indy 500 is going to really generate a lot of headlines, positive, for the IndyCar series. So let's talk negative. We have to talk about NBC again. 2 days in a row in which the start of the race was missed, and yesterday it was for lacrosse going into overtime. You only missed probably the first half of the first lap. This was much more egregious. Of course, it was a bigger event. It was the French Open tennis tournament, which is like the Indy 500 of tennis, but the point remains that somewhere a scheduling wire got crossed somewhere where a tennis match could go that much longer than their time slot to schedule the IndyCar race right up against that. Somebody missed something there because that was quite disappointing, and I certainly know that was disappointing for the viewers at home, particularly those cable cutters who only get the big three networks on their TV, and they're wanting to tune into a race, and you don't even get to see it until there's 30 laps to go. Now, granted, IndyCar got lucky here, where the most exciting stuff happened in the final 30 laps of the race, but ultimately, again, this is kind of the Penske company picnic, right? This was Roger's baby, this race, before, of course, he got the Indianapolis 500. So this is a very important race for the guy who owns the series. And when the TV partner doesn't get them on national TV for perhaps the amount of time that was promised, I'm sure that's not going to go over very well. And it's not like IndyCar apparently doesn't have an option to go to CBS, or at least even negotiate with CBS. CBS talked recently that they weren't even interested, or they didn't have any room at the end, was the quote, despite the fact that their SRX broadcast was very IndyCar heavy, which is kind of interesting. But this is, and it's not going to get any better next year, unfortunately, because NBC is getting rid of their sports network. What does that mean? It means all of the sports, all of the events that are broadcast currently on NBC Sports Network are now also going to be not only competing for that NBC slot, which we're seeing that apparently that's extremely tight right now, where you had tennis and IndyCar and NHL all back-to-back. Now, granted, the NHL is going away next year, which might help alleviate a little bit of pressure next year. But, I don't foresee this getting any better on NBC. It's disappointing. So hopefully, the one advantage IndyCar does have here is that they're going to be able to negotiate a TV contract this year, or are in the process of negotiating that this year. Hopefully, there are some new options for fans to be able to catch up on races when they're supposed to be happening and something else is on television. I know those options already exist in some capacity now, but you want to have more options. You want to have a wider way, or a wider amount of ways to be able to watch the race rather than less, or a more narrow way to watch the race. I think that's how you're going to attract viewers in this era. And by the way, I hope IndyCar takes a little bit of their digital rights back and maybe start streaming some practices on YouTube again. That would be great. Anyway, we'll talk about the TV contract a lot more. Let's talk about the race. So again, like I said at the beginning, the tire compounds and the differences between the reds and the blacks saved this race, and continue to make the Detroit races very interesting. Because you had the strategy call, which Penske and Joseph Newgarden made. They qualified on the pole. They looked like everything they needed to do. But deciding to go black tires, and then finish on the reds, that definitely cost them the race. There was no doubt about it. It looked like they were going to lose the race under green flag conditions, just because Colton Herta on the black tires was absolutely chewing Newgarden's lead alive there, and it was only Jim Jam spinning out in turn one, in fact, right in front of the leaders, which was a bit of a hairy moment to kind of throw a true wrench into the works there. But I will say this about Jimmy. I'm going to defend Jimmy here. He definitely had his best two races of the weekend. He had a mechanical failure in the first race, but was actually mixing it up in the pack. This was another race where he mixed it up a little bit. He was on the lead lap, probably would have been on the lead lap for the majority of the race. Again, the spin kind of took him out of that. But, I've been saying this all along. I think once Jimmy gets to mid-season, you're going to start to see him move up. Year 2 is really going to be where we are going to be able to say, okay, yeah, Jimmy made a good decision to come to IndyCar, he made a bad decision to come to IndyCar. I mean, he is learning on the fly here. They had one practice session, 2 10-minute qualifying sessions. That's not a lot of track time to learn Detroit, and I thought he did it excellently. The restart, obviously that's when we had the Grosjean spin and crash, but you had Pato O'Ward immediately coming to the forefront and started passing guys left, right, and center. And what was interesting was a lot of people after the race, particularly drivers, were talking about how Pato and the Arrow McLaren cars seemed to really fire their tires up, keep them at optimal temperature, or get them up to optimal temperature on the restarts a lot better than the other teams were doing. And that's what almost all of the drivers to a T were talking about, was the fact that Pato could just go and everybody else was kind of struggling. So I thought that was very interesting insight, and good on guys like Kevin Lee and Marty Snyder to get that out of the drivers after the race. But obviously he had the Grosjean yellow, and it looked like Newgarden was actually pulling away a little bit, though I do wonder, again, knowing kind of what we know now, whether his red tires would have been able to stave off the challenge of Herta and O'Ward and all of them. But then when you get back to green, you have O'Ward move past, I think it was Rahal, and then behind Herta and Newgarden, and then Award got past Herta, and then Award was right behind Newgarden. Really fascinating duel where they both kind of held each other up, and then Herta was up in there. Herta made a bonsai move on the outside, somehow managed to keep from going off down the runoff area and still stay in the race. That was amazing. And then you saw the side-by-side battle between Award and Newgarden, which actually came to blows between the two cars, of course, not physically, but they bounced off of each other, and tire smoke was flying, and Newgarden's car got damaged. That looked like a NASCAR race. But Pato Award then just sailed away as Alex Palou got up in there and dueled with Newgarden. And I do have to say, before I really start talking about Pato Award, is that Joseph Newgarden, I know he was disappointed at the end of the race, but God almighty, with Reds that had fallen off the cliff, he did an absolutely amazing job to stay in second position. I wonder what we're going to be talking about at the end of the season, championship-wise, him being able to stay ahead of at least Palou in those final stages, because it looks like it's for sure Palou and Award are the championship leaders, or the drivers who, they're obviously the championship leaders, but they're the two drivers who look like they are primed to really take this championship fight all the way down to Long Beach. So it's going to be interesting to see where they end up. But of course, the guy taking the championship lead at the end of this race was the guy who won, Pato Award. And boy, there's a guy who's driving with a lot of confidence, especially since his win. You look at it, and since he won at Texas in the second race, he went and got, fourth at the Indianapolis 500, which wasn't, it obviously wasn't a winning result, but I thought it was a very, very strong result. It backed up his previous year's Rookie of the Year title very admirably. Then you get to Detroit. He puts it on the pole in race 1, kind of gets hurt by strategy and falls out of contention, but race 2, he's right back there and manages to take advantage of those restarts and outduel Joseph Newgarden, again, kind of like we saw at Texas. It looks like Award is going to be very much a needle in the back of Mr. Newgarden as he pursues the 1 again. And this was kind of something that I looked at going into the season. Pato was very, very quick in testing. I was at a few of the tests this off season, and again, Pato was almost always at the top, and you just kind of felt like he was really coming into his own. And it really seems now that he knocked that win off, he's going to be right there. And I think Alex Palou is again another driver who's very pleasantly surprising. Perhaps not as much if you're a really close observer. Obviously, you look at it, and he was so strong in the Dale Coyne cars last year. You get him in a Ganassi car, he goes out and wins the first race. Looked like he almost won the Indy 500, if not for that pesky Helio Castroneves. But it's cool. It's a youth movement. I mean, I looked at that first two rows of the grid at Detroit, and you have Newgarden, Herta, VK, and Palou, and then you throw Award in there as well, coming from the middle of the field. You got 5 guys to potentially build this series around, and a lot more coming up through the road to Indy, and perhaps some coming from Formula One, as we're seeing with Romain Grosjean. He's a big star as well. So again, kind of what I said yesterday, but in a much more positive light. I think IndyCar's got a lot of good, positive things going for it right now. You got to capitalize on it. I keep saying that, but this series, I mean, they put on a hell of a show at Detroit, a track that traditionally we all kind of crap on, but that was a great race. That was a lot of fun to watch. You just got to get it on TV, and you got to get those stories out there. But hopefully I've done a good enough job of telling the stories and talking about the guys who needed to be talked about today, because it was really exciting, really a positive race. Going into Road America, well, guess what? The 2 championship rivals, I think, are going to be the 2 running up front, Alex Palou, Pato Award. It looks like that may be the story of the season going forward, or maybe a Joseph Newgarden will get up there as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe for more IndyCar and motorsports content. Hopefully I'll be talking about the SRX tomorrow, because I've got a lot of thoughts, and most of them are positive. We'll see you then.